Hello and welcome to EngLearn. Today we're focusing on analyzing historical texts in Section A of Paper 3. You will be given three texts, the first of which, Text A, is a prose text from any period in time since 1500 until today. When analyzing Text A, you will be looking for any clues that show how the language of the text differs from contemporary standard English. Students are often confused and don't know exactly what to look for, which is why I've compiled this list of elements to look for in historical texts. The best idea is to go through the text using different language frameworks. If you need a refresher on what those are, check out the video in the top right corner and then come back here. First, we'll look at graphology and orthography. This area focuses on the visual and written form of English. It includes things like spelling, letter forms, punctuation, and capitalization. These features were not standardized until relatively recently, which means many older texts look very different from what we're used to. Let's start with spelling. Before the 18th century, spelling in English was highly variable. There was no agreed-upon standard or correct version of words, so people wrote them how they heard them, or how they personally thought they should be spelled. Even the same writer might use different spellings for the same word in one text. Here are some examples. You might also see phonetic spellings, spellings based on how the word is pronounced, like this spelling of enough. You can also encounter words with extra letters, and words borrowed from Latin or French keeping their original endings, like the K in public. Now let's look at letter forms. In early printing and handwriting, some letters look different from today's alphabet. An important one is the long S. It looks kind of like an F, but it's actually an S. It was used especially in printed texts between the 16th and early 19th centuries. It was used in the middle and beginning of words. You can also find interchangeable letters. So letters U and V were interchangeable in some words. Look at the spellings of upon, have, and given. The same goes for I and J, in judge and join, for example. When it comes to capitalizations, capital letters were used much more freely in older texts. Writers often capitalized important nouns or ideas and not just proper names, so you can find some words like liberty, virtue, friend, or reason capitalized in older texts, which would not be the case today, of course. When it comes to hyphenation and word breaks, you'll often see that what we now treat as a single word being written with hyphens or even as separate words. This reflects how word boundaries were still evolving. For example, today used to be spelled separately as today, or anything, forever, or tomorrow was hyphenated. Punctuation in earlier English often followed rhetorical more than grammatical rules. What this means is that punctuation marks told the reader where to pause and breathe, and weren't necessarily a mark of how clauses were structured logically. Things to look out for is the heavy use of commas, semicolons, and colons, long sentences strung together by punctuation rather than conjunctions. For example, he walked, he paused, he looked, yet none returned. Also look out for missing quotation marks and apostrophes using contractions, notably tis for it is and twas for it was. Now let's move on to Lexis and semantics. This area focuses on vocabulary used in historical texts and how meanings have changed over time. Lexis refers to the actual words, while semantics is all about the meanings those words carry, and meanings can shift a lot across centuries. First, we'll look at archaic lexis and semantics. The vocabulary of historical texts reveals much about the social context and cultural values of the time. Pay attention to archaic words and phrases that are no longer in common usage today. Here are some example words to look out for. First, we'll start with second-person pronouns, thou, thee, and thy. These forms were used for informal or familiar address, especially in early modern English, and reflects social relationships and formality. Thou was used for one person informally and you was used formally or for multiple people. We also have verb forms such as hath and doth. These older verbs, which stand for has and does, mark the language as early modern and show that the verb conjugation system used at the time was more complex than what we have today. You will also find time expressions such as anon for soon or ear for before, and these words indicate a more formal or poetic style compared to modern texts. Another thing you will be looking out for is semantic change. Some words still exist today, but meant something quite different in the past. This can cause confusion unless you carefully consider context. There are 4 types of semantic change you want to look out for. The first is broadening, where a word gains more meanings over time. For example, holiday used to mean only a religious holiday, from the word holy day, and today can refer to any type of vacation. Next, we have narrowing, when a word becomes more specific. So girl once meant a young person of either sex. Pejoration is when a word develops a negative meaning. For example, silly used to mean innocent or blessed, but now it means foolish. And finally, we have amelioration, where a word gains a more positive meaning. The word knight once meant a servant, and now it implies honor and nobility. Within Lexis and Semantics, we'll also look at formality, register, and tone. The vocabulary of a historical text often reflects its audience, purpose, and genre. You might find highly formal and elaborate language, especially in legal, religious, or philosophical texts, or simpler and more direct words in personal letters or pamphlets. Some features of formal historical lexis include long Latinate words such as henceforth, commencement, or notwithstanding, honorifics and respectful titles such as your grace, my lord, or most esteemed sir, and euphemisms such as using passed away instead of died. In contrast, some texts, especially political satire, pamphlets, or plays, might use colloquial or slang terms and direct address to the reader or listener. When it comes to word formation, we can say that writers in earlier periods were quite creative with how they formed words. You may come across neologisms, which are newly coined words, compounds, or unusual suffixes and prefixes. Watch for compounding with words such as newfangled, morrowtide, and Godspeed, prefixes or suffixes such as uncharitableness, misgovernment, or overzealous, and borrowings from Latin, French, or Greek, especially in science, politics, and religion. Occasionally, writers even invented their own words for rhetorical or poetic effect. Another thing to look out for in Lexis and Semantics are lexical fields. A lexical field is a group of words related to a common topic or theme. Identifying these helps you see what the writer is emphasizing or concerned about. For example, a religious text might use words from the spiritual or moral field, such as sin, virtue, divine, soul, and salvation, whereas a political text may use terms like liberty, tyranny, subjects, rule, and law. Next, we will look at syntax. Syntax refers to the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences. Older English texts often feature more complex sentence structures than what we typically use today. This might include longer sentences or more frequent use of subordinate clauses, leading to more intricate or formal expressions. You will look out for inversion. This is where the normal subject-verb-object order is reversed, often for poetic or rhetorical emphasis. For example, never have I seen such beauty, or in the darkened woods stood a mysterious figure. Also look out for extended sentences. Sentences might go on for longer, with more clauses linked by commas, semicolons, or colons. For example, the knight, though weary from battle, declared his intentions to conquer the next land, for his ambitions were vast and his soldiers brave. Also look out for frequent use of subordination. Subordinate clauses are used to give additional information and make the sentence more elaborate. Though the storm raged outside, the family remained safe within their home, comforted by the warmth of the fire. We'll also look at verb patterns and agreement. In older texts, verb forms often behave differently from modern usage, especially in terms of subject-verb agreement or the use of auxiliary verbs. Look out for plural you. In earlier English, you was both the formal singular and plural pronoun. By the 17th century, you replaced thou for both singular and plural usage in most contexts. Also look out for older verb forms like the past tense of certain verbs, which were more irregular or formal. Pay attention to do support as well. Its absence in questions and negatives is a key indicator of older syntax. In older English, particularly before the 17th century, negation was often formed without the help of do. So you said, I understand not, instead of I do not understand. You also had double negatives. In older English, double negatives were often used for emphasis, and they were not always considered incorrect. I know not nothing about it. This form of double negation emphasizes the negation more than a single negative would. Now we'll move on to morphology. Morphology refers to the structure of words, including how they are formed and modified. In older texts, you'll notice differences in word endings, inflection, word formation, and pronouns. When it comes to verb endings and conjugation, in the past, English had more inflections than modern English, which means that the verbs change their endings depending on things like tense, person, and number. For example, they used thou didst instead of you did for second person singular form of the verb do in the past tense. We also had thou hast and thou art. He loveth instead of he loves in earlier English for third person singular. Another example is I knoweth instead of I know. The use of eth as a verb ending was common in older texts, especially before the 17th century. It signified a more formal or archaic tone. When it comes to pronouns and their verb forms, the pronouns were definitely more complex in earlier times, with many distinctions that no longer exist in modern English. For example, we have thou, thee, thy, and thine. Thou art is you are. Thee is you used as an object. Thy is your, and thine is yours. Ye was sometimes used for plural or formal you. Ye are the light of the world. You are in plural form. Finally, let's look at pragmatics. Pragmatics is the study of how context influences the meaning of language. When reading older texts, you need to understand the social norms, cultural values, and historical context that influenced how people communicated. In this sense, you will look at politeness and address forms. In historical texts, people were often much more formally addressed than we are today. Social hierarchies were much more rigid, and this is reflected in the way people use language to show respect or deference. Titles, honorifics, and address forms were very important, and their usage can tell you a lot about the social dynamics of the time. For example, my lord and your grace were used as forms of address to those of a higher social rank. Sir and madam were used much more frequently in the past, especially when speaking to strangers or those in authority. In historical texts, there was also often less directness than what we are used to today. Speakers often expected the listener to infer meaning based on shared knowledge or social norms. For example, if you said, if you wish, you may consider my offer, what you actually meant is that you should consider my offer. Finally, another really important aspect are social and cultural norms. Language in historical texts is often shaped by cultural and social norms that may be unfamiliar to modern readers. Words or phrases that were once common or acceptable might have different meanings or connotations today. Understanding these differences is crucial in analyzing older texts. You should pay attention to phrases or words that reflect a different understanding of gender, class, or status than what we have today. For example, a woman's place in society was often a topic of conversation, and ladies and gentlemen had much stricter social roles and expectations attached to them in earlier centuries. Hopefully now you have a better idea of what to look for in Section A of Paper 3. If you'd like more videos for Papers 3 and 4, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Happy exam season, everyone!